Oh, okay. So we are live. All right, here we go. What's up, everybody? Um, as promised, we said that we would go live here when the city council ended their committee vote. Is a real historic day. Along this process that we've seen here the last 60 days since the protests have started. Joined here by Kevin Schofield of SCC Insight and by Marcus Green. South Seattle. You know what? Some long days on the set, guys. You gotta forgive me.
Hey, it
What's
was
up,
a long
Marcus?
day. It was a long
Yeah,
day in city council meetings too. Very,
Yeah,
very
I feel
long day.
bad for you, Kevin, because at least I was able to go get some air.
right.
You've been
No air. I'm
following this
dying
stuff
here.
right
Yeah.
on, man.
Yeah.
Well, it's important.
And how are
This
you,
is like you
Marcus?
Yeah.
said.
I'm doing great. Good to see you again. It's been too long. Been too long.
Okay, so let's do this, Kevin. Man, I'm gonna give you a few minutes here. Why don't you please tell us what has happened today at City Hall? What is in and what is out? And I know there's some stuff that's not so juicy what everybody's waiting for. We got the real exciting stuff too, but I'll let you start where you want to start, man. Let's tell us all about it.
Yeah. So today the city council was working through about 25 different potential amendments to Seattle Police Department's budget. Some really small stuff, some big stuff. And they just finished about 10, 15 minutes ago, and sort of going through all those amendments. Now their staff goes and sort of cleans up all the last little details. Monday morning they'll take a final vote, push it out of committee, and then Monday afternoon they'll give the final approval to the budget package. But for today, they kind of have an idea about they basically made the big decisions about where they want to make cuts. And so a big part of it was really looking at headcount, because so much of the police department's budget is people. That's they have about 2,100 employees, and it makes up just the direct sort of compensation to their employees is about 84% of the budget. There's another 12 to 14%, which is all the kind of indirect expenses that go along with that. And so almost all their budget is headcount. So if you want to cut their budget, you basically have to cut headcount. Now, the hard part about that is most of those positions are represented by unions. They actually have to go negotiate all that stuff. So, and they don't really know how long that process is going to take. Councilmember Swant, really hopes it can go fast, and she likes citing the fact that the Metro bus service, negotiated some cuts with some of their drivers in about 25 days. But the city's HR department and labor relations group is saying that it could take as long as 3 months to do that. And in fact, maybe even longer than that. So the city council kind of estimating how much they're going to save by cutting heads now. By the time they're actually laid off, maybe November 1st. So they only really save a couple months worth of salary at the end of the year on that. So the amount of money they're going to save is small. But today they basically approved cutting about 100 positions, 100 sworn officers from Seattle Police Department by the end of the year. And now, assuming this all gets approved by next Monday, the city has to go through the process of negotiating with the unions and seeing how quickly they can pull it all together. They figure if they really sort of can pull the trigger on all this stuff by November 1st, that'll probably save about $2.6 million, which is not a lot of money in the $400+ million budget. But then again, this is a starting point. What they keep saying over and over again is that they really want to get to the sort of in the 2021 budget with a plan, bigger, deeper kind of cuts. And to that extent, they today also approved $14 million of spending on community-led initiatives to really start to put the stuff in place, the plans in place, the work in place, so that they can have alternatives to police for the kinds of things where people would call 911 and we really don't want to send police out for. So they approved $10 million for capacity building in a variety of different community-led organizations that could really do response for people in crisis, for mental health situations, again, for places where we don't necessarily want to send out police officers with guns, which might just make the situation worse. They approved $4 million for the Community Safety Initiative, which is this partnership with the Southeast Safety Network Hub, Boys and Girls Club, the Alive and Free program, YMCA, Community Passageways, Urban Family, to again really deal with creating programs for youth to get them, keep them on the right track. They're all people of color-led organizations. That's a good start. And then they've got $3 million more that they want to approve on Monday, but they can't just, that's not just moving money around. They actually have to change some laws to make that work. So that's going to have to wait till Monday. They're still writing the new ordinance to go do that. But the $3 million is going to go to community-led organizations to really start planning out what a reimagining of the police department and community and public safety would look like. So altogether, it looks like it's going to be about $17 million that they can invest in those kinds of community-led organizations right away as they start paring back on the police department in the rest of this year.
So Kevin, when all is said and done, how much of a percentage is actually going to be taken from the SPD budget? I know there are reports that it's around 41% right now if you annualize it out. Yeah,
so the math is still a little uncertain. So what Councilmember Mosqueda is saying is based upon the layoffs and attrition and other reductions that the mayor and Chief Best have also proposed. You put that all together and annualize it for next year, so going into 2021, they think it's going to be about 41%. Councilmember Sawant said today that she doesn't believe the math on that. And I haven't had a time to really sit down and kind of work through, does it really all add up to 41% yet? But Councilmember Mosqueda, the budget chair, says it's 41. It's going to be 41% at least next year. And Councilmember Swan says, I'm not sure I believe that number right now.
Got you. Well, I know you also brought up the fact, right, that the majority of the budget is headcount essentially. And I know at the press conference yesterday between a joint press conference between Carmen Best and Mayor Durkin, one of the things that they brought up and has sort of been, they've been singing sort of a refrain about is that any type of layoffs of the 100 people who stand to lose their positions, it would disproportionately affect women and people of color. Is there any truth to that?
Yeah. So I mean, this is the part of this that everybody is on the same page on is that the last 2 years, they've really been working on diversity recruiting. And the last few years, recruiting classes in SPD have been the most diverse they've ever had, right? In terms of the people of color, in terms of speaking multiple languages, in terms of lived experience, they've really done a good job with that. Now, the contracts with the police officers specify very clearly that if there are layoffs, they're in reverse order of seniority. So all the people most recently hired are going to be the ones who normally would be laid off. And here's where it gets tricky, because there is one written exception into that, which says that there's this accountability organization called the Public Safety Civil Service Commission. It's kind of a mouthful to say. I always mess up on the PSCSC. That kind of is the regulating body for labor relations. And if there are labor disputes like between SPD and SPOG, they're the ones that go arbitrate those. Now, Chief Best can go petition to be able to do layoffs out of order. And the city council is saying, we want you to go do that. They've written into these, budget changes that they're requesting the chief to go do that. Now, what the chief and the mayor are saying is the way that works is the chief can't just go to the PSCSC and say, I want to lay off 100 people out of order. That you actually have to justify it on an individual by individual basis, right? Yeah. And so they're saying it's an enormous amount of work to go do that. Now, what Council President Gonzalez came back with today is said, okay, but look, we're going to do layoffs eventually one way or the other. It's either going to be this year or next year. And so eventually, if we want to go out of order and preserve the diversity that we built up in the last couple of years, there's these barriers. It's going to be hard to go do that, but it's not insurmountable, and we're going to have to go do that hard work to do it. So, if what Council President Gonzalez was saying today was, if the mayor and the chief are balking on doing that now, what does that say about their commitment to doing it next year? Are they just not committed to ever doing layoffs around this, or or, what are they really saying here? And what should we read into the fact that they don't seem willing to go to even try to do it this year? That's what Gonzalez was saying today around this.
Got it. Is it
Right.
well?
So what are some of some? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Marcus.
No, I was just going to say, and because I know that our city council sort of has a reputation of saying grandiose things and then also doing grandiose things, but then sort of somewhat walking them back later. I mean, I'm thinking about referencing the health tax, referencing Wells Fargo move. How do we know that, when it comes to, let's say, the 2023 biennium budget, that, what commitments are there that, this sort of level of funding for SPD is going to be consistent, and that, it doesn't just increase one day when we get, a different city council in here?
There isn't, right? This city council is working on a resolution that we'll probably see on Monday that states in words their intent, but it's not legally binding. Resolutions, are basically words on paper that way. So they can announce to everybody, this is our plan for what to do, but, does it really happen? And, there are aspects of it that are out of their control, right? At this point, the city budget office is saying, we've got a big deficit, of revenues this year, right? Our revenues coming into the city from taxes and such are going to be down about, $210 to $300 million. Next year could be even worse, right? So, what they're able to do and spend next year, it's hard to really say. What will happen with COVID next year? Will we have a vaccine at the end of the year, and a couple months into next year, things are going to be great again? Or is COVID going to be a big problem, and is the economic issues around it going to be a big problem well into next year? And how much will we spend on that? So there are these big financial issues that we can't dismiss entirely, but
Right.
eventually are going to play into the kind of budget decisions that they have to make. But the 2021 budget, they're going to start writing that at the end of September, right? The mayor and her budget office and all the departments are already right now working on putting together the proposal for, the mayor's proposal will get rolled out the last week of September. And that's not far away. I mean, that's less than 2 months away, right? So it's not like they're really going to get a big break when, on Monday, when they finish rewriting the 2020 budget, they're going to get a few weeks break, and then they're going to be right into the 2021 budget.
Right. Well, I know there's a lot made of, the voter-proof majority that will supposedly, happen once this vote does go down and on city council on Monday. What do you see? The mayor and city council already have a very contentious relationship at this point. It might just be like it went from heated to maybe nuclear in the last couple of weeks.
It's been pretty hostile, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, do you see that continuing? Do you see that some maybe concessions on Mayor Durkin's part? Should this pass as is on Monday?
Yeah, I think it's really hard to say at this point. Yesterday, Chief Best and the mayor had a press conference, and they said, I think these things that the council are doing are irresponsible, but I'm always willing to meet with them and talk with them, and we need to come together and find common ground. And the city council, today, were very dismissive of a lot of things, and accusing the mayor of misrepresenting them in a press conference yesterday, and also said, hey, we need to rise above this and come together and find our common ground. And so the words on both sides, are divisive, and yet they're both saying we need to come together, and yet they don't really seem to be coming together on this.
Gotcha.
And I don't know what is going to bring them together on this. And when you look at some of the polls that have been out around defunding SPD, it is divisive for this city, right? There is a strong majority support for rethinking the role of SPD and thinking about what we ask police officers to respond to. But in terms of like a 50% cut, the city is evenly split on that. In terms of like who should really be the leader in designing a new public safety system, the city is deeply split on the city council versus the mayor, right? None of them are broadly trusted. The person who gets the best response is Chief Best on that. So, who is really the leader or the set of leaders that are going to take us forward on it? It's not like the residents of Seattle seem to have strong faith in the city council or the mayor right now, and neither one of them really seems to be rising above this.
Gotcha. And just so you know, I mean,
Right.
veto-proof majority, not voter-proof.
Go ahead, Marcus.
Veto-proof, yeah.
No, go ahead. I just want to clarify. I meant veto-proof majority, not voter-proof. I know. I need some coffee now. I'm sorry.
Oh, we all do. Yeah.
You ain't the only one. So Kevin, a question for you is, what were some of the things that happened kind of like you predicted in some of our previous conversations, and what were some surprises today, if any?
Yeah, so Councilmember Sawant had a bunch of proposals to really kind of do deeper cuts and try to get up to 50% this year in cuts to SPD, and those didn't go very far at all. In fact, those got dismissed pretty quickly. And that, I predicted that was probably what was going to happen. What ended up being really contentious today was defunding the navigation team. And this has been a hot button issue for the city council, and another point of real disagreement between the mayor and the city council for a number of years now on how to handle sweeps of homeless encampments and what are the right protocols to follow around that. And today, the city council basically defunded the navigation team. They cut 14 positions for police officers to be working with, as part of the navigation team. And they took almost all the funding from the Human Services Department and, from other kind of general services department in the city that were going towards the navigation team and encampment removals. And they redirected all that to outreach services. And the part they left in place was some money in Parks and Recreation and Seattle Public Utilities to do litter and garbage cleanup at the sites of encampments. But, they left open some hard questions, such as if a homeless encampment really does show up in the middle of a sidewalk or in the middle of, a park playground, and the person who's there is intransigent and doesn't really want to be removed from there, what happens? Whose job is it to take care of that? Right? They didn't really answer that question, but you could see clearly what their intent was. And they spoke to this pretty eloquently, saying, certainly some of the members did of the council, saying that, the navigation team is an approach that I guess you could call an experiment that they embarked on about 4 years ago, and it really hasn't worked to anybody's satisfaction. And this notion of having police officers and outreach people working together to do outreach, but then at the end of the day, removing encampments where they need to remove them, turned out to really be sort of a conflict in those two missions, two parts of the mission of the group. And so they kind of approached it as two policy questions today. First policy question was, do we want police officers as part of that, or is that just making the situation worse and stressing out homeless people that we want to help more? And the city council pretty much, I'll say a strong majority of them said, no, we don't want to do that. That was, I think, that was a unanimous. City council unanimously said, I'm just checking my cheat sheet over on the side here. They said unanimously, we don't want police officers there. So now once you remove the police officers, the outreach people who have been kind of doing that work that ends up with encampment removal said, we don't want to go do that work if we don't have police officers with us because we don't feel safe doing it. And so having already decided they don't want police officers there, the council came back and said, okay, in that case, we're going to cut the rest of the work of encampment removals there and redirect all of this towards doing outreach and really outsourcing it, because there are organizations like this great one called Reach here in the city, which are really experienced at doing outreach and service and case management for homeless individuals. And the hope now is, with more direct focus on that and less of a mixed message with having police officers accompanying them, they can do a more effective job at getting homeless people off the streets and into different kinds of shelter. The issue with it, though, is we still don't have enough shelter. We don't have enough tiny home villages. We don't have enough enhanced shelter, and when we expand that, in fact, right now we're decreasing it because we're de-intensifying that. We realize that congregate shelters, the way that we were running them, with really sort of dense cots and beds in rooms, is a nightmare in the world of COVID. Right? It's just creating an opportunity for COVID to spread among the homeless population. So they actually have to de-densify those kinds of things. So in some sense, we're actually losing capacity in our homeless shelter system right now. And it's constantly full, and we don't have enough affordable housing and enough permanent supportive housing to move people out of those shelters. So we get people off the street into the shelters, and then they get full, and we're stuck. And we don't have a capacity to move more people off the streets into shelters. And that creates more of this kind of concern that all we're doing is pushing homeless people around the city and not really helping them by cleaning up homeless encampments.
Yeah.
Right. And Marcus had kind of said this. Let's say it in a different way here. What do you think that a lot of these city council members, when they stepped out there and they said, like you said, this 7 to 2 of them said that they were for defund 50%, right? Did any of them do any kind of research before they made these declarations out here to the public? You know, me and Marcus were talking earlier, and people hear me on the morning update show all the time. And tomorrow we're gonna bring our chicken and waffles and our syrup in here, because as soon as I started hearing all this, I'm like, man, these guys is gonna waffle. We're gonna bring the syrup. But why even put themselves in that position? You know what I'm saying? To back something like that. And then today, when there's the vote, it only got one vote, and that was Sawant. And then I don't know why you said there was one abstention, and I'm not sure why. Was it Gonzalez who abstained? I'm just your opinion, like, because the city council is good for doing stuff like this, but why are they doing that?
They're elected officials. They're in political positions, and they are trying to respond to the politics of the city. And this is one where, again, the city is deeply divided. They, have.
Well, hold on. Let me stop you right there, though, because it seems to me if they're trying to respond to their constituents, and their constituents were the ones who clearly told them to vote no, did they not talk to maybe their constituents beforehand? Because you're like, it's like they're responding reactionary, and then they're responding like, oh, my bad, let me go talk to the people, the man on the street, and then you get what I'm saying?
I think the city council, they know who got them elected, right? And they listen to those advocacy groups. They understand the power of the labor movement in the city. They understand the power of certain advocacy groups, and they believe with them, right? They are ideologically aligned with the progressive ideals, and I'm not saying that in any way to criticize them, right? Because these council members, as they ran for office, have been clear about where they stand on a bunch of these issues, right? And so I think they saw this and the movement that came out of the George Floyd protests as an opportunity to really accomplish something that in many ways I think they've wanted to accomplish for a long time. And they jumped at that, and they made some commitments. And then I think there were two pieces. I think one, they heard from some other constituents, but more importantly, I think they started realizing all the logistical and legal and contractual barriers that they actually had to get around in order to actually get a bunch of this stuff done. And it wasn't going to be just like, we can snap our fingers and do this. It was going to take a long time and a lot of effort to do this. And I don't think when 7 of them committed to, defunding SPD by 50%, I don't think any of them realized at that point exactly how hard it was going to be. And then as reality struck and they realized what it was really going to take and how much of a plan they needed to go build and the capacity building they needed to do in community organizations, they went, oh crap, we got to walk this back.
Well, and Kevin and Owen and I had this conversation a little earlier, but it was like, where did people derive this 50% number? Like, where did it come from? And how did it? Yeah, And essentially, is there
Yeah.
anybody else that's modeling this 50% number?
Well, I mean, so I can tell you as a reporter, I clearly heard that first from the community and from the protest movements before I heard it from the city council, right? So it's a very valid question to ask, right? Where did the 50% number come from? Why did the defund movement come up with that number, right? Why were Black Lives Matter and Decriminalize Seattle setting that as a goal, right? And how much research went behind that? And I know that King County Equity Now and Decriminalize Seattle and other advocacy groups and organizations have really been doing solid research on this for a number of years.
Right.
But I personally haven't seen all their homework on this. I don't know to the extent that the 50% number was really based in hard math, that somebody has a spreadsheet and said, yep, we know that it can come from this.
Right. I wanted to bring this up here is that we kind of seen the city council do this twice in less than 2 months, and it all based right under protest. It was kind of something similar in a sense of the law they wanted to pass that was going to ban tear gas and less than lethals. And there was no way that a change could be made to SPD operating basically their procedures because they're under a federal consent decree. And you see that the federal government waited until the 24th hour and slapped that law down. Did anybody in city council, I mean, do they talk to other people to be like, can this idea become law? Because I mean, all they had to do was talk to like the CPC or talk to Judge Jones or Judge Robart and say, hey, if we put this law here, how is it going to be able to come into law considering there's a consent decree? But there was a groundswell around it. It passed the city council. I think it was unanimous vote that they're going to ban all less than lethals. It went there to a federal court, got slapped down in less than an hour by Judge Robart. And I'm just wondering, how diligent is the city council in actually trying to figure out how something can actually become law? Or is it like, people are just saying things because they feel some kind of way or it sounds cool or you're getting lots of tweets or what? Like, what's happening?
Yeah, and that's a really interesting one. So when they actually passed that ordinance that banned all the crowd control weapons, inside that, in the text of that ordinance, it says it tells the city attorney to go notify the DOJ and the court and Judge Robart, right? So they knew that it was impacted by the consent decree, and they did it anyway. I think even more damning for them, they knew that the Office of Police Accountability and the Office of Inspector General and the CPC had been asked, and they were part of this process of asking those three accountability organizations to go make a bunch of recommendations on crowd control weapons. And those three organizations came back and said, yeah, we want to do this. Give us to the end of the month. Give us to the end of June. And the city council said, we're not going to wait that long. We're just, we're not even going to wait for you guys to tell us your recommendations as our resident domain experts on this. We're just going to go do this right now. And I look at that and go, why? Why did you jump the gun on that, right? I mean, it's not like they didn't even have political air cover. They had the Community Police Commission and the OPA and the OIG all saying, wait till the end of the month. We're doing good research on this. Let us give you our recommendations, and then you will have solid ground for doing the right thing. And they just said, no, we're going to go do it now. And this is, it's an interesting dynamic with this city council, and I think probably more so than the city council that was in place last year. We've got a bunch of new members of the city council, and they're trying to be responsive to advocacy groups, to constituents, and they're a little impulsive in some of these things.
Yeah, so Kevin, I mean, and I know this vote just took place less than an hour ago, and I'm not sure how familiar you are with what Minneapolis is doing with their city council. Obviously voted to abolish the police, and they're doing that over the course of a year,
Right.
and meeting with community and so forth. But I mean, do you think that, given what you do know, as of now, do you think that the city council is moving at a reasonable pace, or a responsible pace, should I say, in defunding the police?
So I think we're going to see in this resolution. They put out a draft of this resolution earlier, and it kind of lays out a timeline. This one we're going to see on Monday. It lays out the council's timeline for where they want to go over the next year with this, and I think it's pretty reasonable in terms of kind of the steps. And I think I really applaud them for the fact that they put this. It looks like it's going to end up being about $17 million into investing in capacity building in community-led organizations now. And they had a great budget meeting a few weeks back where Nikita Alder came in and really sort of emphasized this point with the council that, too often these community-led organizations really just run on shoestring budgets, right? And they've never, ever seen big growth. And if we want to go do something like change the way we do 911 response so that we can have civilian-led, community-led organizations respond to people in crisis and not people in uniforms with guns, then, we need to go build capacity in these organizations that have never had to scale up before, right? We need to go do that now because it's going to take them 6 to 12 months to figure out how to go do that. So I totally applaud the city council. It's absolutely right to do that now. The hard question in this is, is it the right thing to do to cut 100 positions from SPD right now, right? Because we don't have those alternatives in place now. And is that just going to mean that when people call 911 today, today or in November after the layoffs take place, is the response time just going to be slower, right? And are we okay with that, right? Because it's really going to be into next year, probably well into next year before we get these other kinds of replacements spun up, right? They've got to do a bunch of work on, building a new kind of 911 call center organization, right? And they're making some investments now to go figure out how to do that. And that's great. But building that is going to take time to do that. And retraining people is going to take time. And building capacities organizations is going to take time to do that. And so should we really be cutting 100 officers right now? I understand completely from a political response to what the movement is saying today, why you don't want to go do that. In practice, is that going to turn out to be a smart thing to do right now before we have alternatives in place? I don't know. That's a hard question. What do you think about, Marcus? What do you think about that?
That's the $1 million question, I guess $17 million question. But I will say, I mean, there are a ton of people who I've spoken with who are like, we have shootings that are going on and that have gone on, I should say, in the CD in South Seattle and King County gun violence is obviously up, and police are fully funded right now. So, and they're not stopping these things. So, why, if we have less police, will it be that much different? And well, I don't know.
That's a really valid question, right? You can look at it either way. It's like, the response isn't great today. Will it matter, or will it get even worse? And will that matter? It's a really, I'm not great at predicting the future. So,
well, and I wonder you're right. I wonder, will the police force, as it will be constituted, then will it just sort of concentrate around more rich, affluent areas, versus areas that aren't that affluent? And I say that as somebody who lives in Skyway and areas that have lower median incomes.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting question. So, and that turns out to be one of the other battles that's happening right now between the council and Chief Best. So officially, the city charter says that the police chief gets to determine how to deploy officers, right? And one of the things they did last year, or actually sort of this year in writing this year's budget, was it used to be that each of the 5 precincts had its own sort of separate budget line item. And this year they kind of combined it all into one, so it was one big pool of money. Now, why that's important is the city council, while they can't tell the police chief, like, you have to put this many officers here, you have to put this many officers here, they write the budget for each of those line items. So if it's all one pool, they can just say, well, here's how much you're spending on patrol, right, across the 5 precincts. But if it's broken out by precinct, then they could say, well, the budget for the Southwest precinct is this, and the budget for the North precinct is this, and West precinct is this. And so one of the things that city council is going to be, they have to do this in a separate ordinance. But they're going to do it on Monday. Is they're going to pass an ordinance that breaks it back out into 5 separate precincts again. So the city council can basically micromanage how much budget each precinct gets, right? To that very issue that you're raising. It's like, let's make sure that that South Seattle isn't underserved.
Well, I'm glad there is some planning going on, at least in that bit. So yeah.
And Chief Best is not like this, right? This is
I got
definitely
a
a source
question
of
for
contention.
Marcus.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Marcus, how do you think the streets are going to respond? I mean, there was quite a lot of protesters, and not even just protesters, a lot of citizens in the city that when these city council members came out and made this grand statement, they really galvanized they became darlings kind of the protesters and protest movement. How do you think on the street level a lot of people are going to respond?
I mean, it depends on, what the final details actually are when it comes to Monday. I mean, I'll say this, like, I think if, everything isn't in there, so to speak, that people want, then it's going to be some issues. I mean, we already have seen it now where people are protesting outside of council members' homes. And some of them are council members who have agreed to the cuts. So, depending on what narrative emerges outside of, from Monday after the vote, that's really what's going to, going to lead the catalyst, I should say, to what the response is going to be. If it's something where everybody can sort of feel good about themselves, if you will, and that's the general consensus, then, I mean, I think for the most part, it'll be very celebratory. Now, if there's in the 11th hour, some shenanigans happen, I believe that people are going to hear about it. So.
And speaking of 11th hour tactics and shenanigans and parliamentary procedures, Kevin, tell us what cards might people have up their sleeve going on to Monday's full council vote?
Well, so there's one big issue. You never know exactly what they're going to come up with last minute. There's going to be some last minute amendments. The one issue that they started talking about today that doesn't have a dollar number associated with it directly, but it was a fairly contentious issue, was a proposal by Councilmember Sawant to basically prevent SPD from helping really in pretty much any way with the prosecution of anyone that participated in the protests over the last couple of months. And it started as a very broad prohibition, and through debate and reconciliation across the council members, it's been narrowed down a little bit, right? So, a couple of the issues around the intent here is to say, hey, look, there are peaceful protesters out there, and we've certainly seen some instances where police officers have basically, arrested somebody, on a charge of, attacking a police officer or something like that, basically falsified something so they can get somebody off the street and arrest them, for a number of different reasons, either whether, it was just spite or, as part of crowd control, or, just an officer got angry and acted out and, trying to create a defense afterwards. Right. So, and we certainly don't want that happening. We don't want those folks prosecuted for those things. But then there's issues of, actual physical violence that happen. And, whether, some of the acts of physical violence on other people, some are, destruction of property and arson and things like that. And what do we do about those? And then there's another issue, which is, well, okay, what does it mean? The amendment that Councilmember Sawant brought forward said, for people who are participating in the Justice for George Floyd protests. Well, okay, but what about somebody who wasn't participating but was, a bystander? Or what about somebody who was a counter protester but was a peaceful counter protester, right? They have First Amendment rights too. So who exactly are we extending this protection to, and who are we not? And are we really sort of capturing the right things so that we're protecting peaceful protesters, but we're not protecting people doing stuff that we really object to, right? And it's tough to get it right. So there was a long debate about that today. They could not get the language right today. They're going to keep working on it, and we'll probably see that again on Monday. And there'll probably be much more debate about it again. I think it's unlikely that somebody will just show up with, a new version of it and everybody go, oh yeah, that's great, that's perfect, right? I think there's going to be more debate because it really is a tough, contentious issue and very, very difficult to get right. And it's a tough one where, again, the council is trying to use the power of the purse to make other people do things. Officially, they can't tell, the county prosecutor or the city attorney who they can and can't prosecute. But what they're trying to say in this case is we can withhold SPD budget to make sure that they don't try to help in collecting evidence or providing evidence to the city attorney or county prosecutor that would end up aiding in prosecuting anybody who was protesting. And just get the nuances of getting that right are super, super hard.
Right. Well, I mean, you talk about those nuances, Kevin. I wanted to ask you, what are some potential unintended consequences, you could see sort of coming from this legislation once it's passed on Monday? Is there anything that you think maybe the city council isn't quite delving into as deeply as they might need to?
You talk about the whole SPD budget stuff?
Yeah.
Well, we talked a little bit about the navigation team. Like, okay, if when I interviewed Councilmember Morales a couple months ago, literally the day after the first sort of Saturday big sort of protest and violent protest here in Seattle, and even she admitted there are some cases where like there's an encampment in the middle of a sidewalk where it really does have to be removed, and like who's going to do that work? I think that's an issue. I think. There's a larger issue that, SPD does a bunch of things. They do criminal investigations. And, if most of the cuts, that the city council is making are officially on the patrol side, but it's up to Chief Best to decide who, in fact, they lay off. At the end of the day, is it going to cut back on a lot of the criminal investigations side too? Just because she feels she needs to have more people on patrol, right, to cover all the 911 requests in the time frame that people want to see responses in. So is it going to become harder to do criminal investigations, right? It's those kinds of trade-offs. They're cut back a little bit on harbor patrol, right? And now we're in the summer peak season where there's a lot of boating going on, right? So what is the right size for harbor patrol? I think there's going to be a lot of issues. One of the other places where they're making cuts is to the officers that are part of the public affairs group in SPD, right? And they're the ones who respond to to us. If we need information from SPD, we're the folks they call, right? Well, they haven't completely gutted that team, but they've mostly gutted that team, right? I think it's going from like 8 people, 5 officers and 3 civilians down to 3 civilians, right? And all the other requests that they can't handle are going to get pushed over into what's known as the sort of public disclosure group, the ones that handle official public document requests. And Marcus, I don't know how often you do those, but when I do those, I get they come back and say, okay, we received requests. We're going to get to that in 6 months, right? It's like I can't wait 6 months to write a story on this stuff, right? So exactly. I think I worry that we're going to end up with SPD being even less transparent because we. I
didn't know that was possible, Kevin, but yeah,
it's going to be tough for them, right? But sometimes they do actually give us useful information about what they're doing. And I guess you could think of it in the same situation as what happens when patrol gets cut back, right? The response may get worse. Is it going to matter, right? We're going to see a bunch of different ways that plays out.
Got it.
So, Omari, what are you hearing on the street from folks?
Well, the first thing I was going to say is that the PIO, Public Information Officer, and in cutting public information, because I call public information all the time. from SPD. I talk to them once a week to follow up. What's the status with the murders of Lorenzo Anderson and
Right.
Antonio Mays Jr.? I talk to them once a week about what's going on. Is there any leads? Because a lot of people that follow us here on Converge and followed our coverage on CHOP, we get so many people who chime in and say, hey, is there any word on Lorenzo Anderson? Is there any word on Antonio Mays Jr.? Just the general public, they just reach out. And so, I mean, once a week, I talk to the PIO over there, if just following up on that or just following for clarification and everything else. So, a cut to public information, but that's somebody that I can say I interact with daily. Luckily, I don't interact with the police a lot, you know what I'm saying? But I do interact with public information officer. And you bring up a good point, Kevin, is that if you get rid of the PIO, if I'm trying to reach out on behalf of the public, to see like, hey, what's going on here, especially with these murders and the uptick of murders going on, are we going to be able to get the information back as fast as possible? Whenever there's something that's going out on Twitter, where police are dispatched, how's that going to get affected? We get a lot of information from there. So, I always try to look at as much as possible at different sides of issues. But all three of us are media people. So it would be very interesting if all of a sudden we didn't have an information exchange at all, or a very limited one, or you fill out a contact form on a web page or something.
Right.
Yeah, I just worry that, three of us are all indie media, independent media, right? I think Seattle Times and King 5 and Cairo are going to get their calls answered, right? I think it's us who are really going to feel the pain of these kinds of cutbacks. Right?
Yeah,
there'll be nobody to answer us.
Yeah, the SPD already moves at the pace of erosion a lot when it comes to these requests. So yeah.
And as far as you asked me, Kevin, it's like, what are the streets saying? Well, luckily, a good number of the streets, at least have following us here, you've been painting a very accurate picture of exactly what was going to happen today for the last 2.5 weeks. And that's why there's no real bombshells that have occurred here for people that have been following us and have been watching our conversations and our updates, because you telegraphed a lot of this. And you telegraphed how the vote was going to break down. You telegraphed with Sawant and everything else and how that was going to go. But I think that what we realized here in Seattle is that people kind of want to say that the silent majority is the far right, or the silent majority is the far left. I think the silent majority in Seattle is really just the everyday person who's trying to, and I think that's what your polling showed, is just the everyday person who's like, I could do this or I could do that, but they're not on a polar side of either side of this issue, and I think that's probably kind of what we're seeing here.
So if you just, from your experience, if just theoretically, if you had to divide up the city right now into kind of percentages of polar left, polar right, for Seattle polar right, which is kind of like center in the rest of the country, and kind of and let's just be honest about that, right? And then sort of in the middle, what would you guys say is the percentage? Or even why don't we just cast it just on this issue around the SPD right now, sort of polar left, polar right, in the center? How would you divide up the 100% across those?
What's the bell curve essentially is what you're saying?
Yeah.
I in my experience, this just goes. It's just from my experience. I think it goes very much maps on with with essentially what the country is, where you have 20% on the far left, 20% on the far right. In the middle, more or less, are people who are reasonable and can be swayed, one way or the other once they get the facts and great reporting from places like Converge, from SCC Insight, and from the Emerald. I'm just shameless plug right there.
Yeah, but especially the Emerald.
Donate to all of us though. But yeah, I think that would be the breakdown if we were going to do a bell curve.
Do you think, what is your experience in terms of sort of the gender, ethnic, racial sort of skews of that?
I think just because the city is around 66% white, I think I think it's going to be disproportionately Black folks who tend to and Black folks and people of color who tend towards center left to too far the left, just because, that just tracks with, sociologically, it's the people who are most disenfranchised who are going to, have issues with the system. So that's, I think that would, if you want me to put a percentage on it, I would say, maybe probably 50% of folks are in sort of that, it would be folks of color who are in that sort of center left to far left category.
And do you think that holds true sort of in general and specifically for this SPD issue?
I think I will say that I think it's even higher than that for the SPD issue. It might be closer to 70% folks of color, just based on experience. Isn't to say obviously folks of color are not a monolith. I mean, we obviously will put that out. But yeah, I would say that it's a strong majority. Not even, more certainly more. It's more than a plurality. I say a strong majority.
And I assume that reflects the lived experience for Black people in the city.
Absolutely. I will tell you this. I've never talked to, and granted this is anecdotal, but I've never talked to one Black person in the city since, and I don't want to say how old I am, but I'm closer to 40 than 30, who has not had a bad experience with an SPD officer. So I don't know, Kevin. What would your I'm curious, like Kevin, and what would your bell curve be and your breakdown be when it comes to demographically?
Yeah, this is a place where I just second guess myself, right? Because I am a middle-aged white guy, right, who's experienced enormous amount of privilege, and it's a place where, and this is one of my challenges as a journalist, and I'm sure the two of you share as well. And particularly, I'm a one-person shop. I sit at home late at night, I write this stuff, and I have to challenge myself and say, okay, like, am I really seeing reality here? Is the view out of my two eyes actually reflective of what's going on? And this is a place where I just say, like, I can't trust my own experience of this, right? You guys have probably read some of the stuff that I've written where I go through and I do sort of deep analysis and numbers, and like I read polls and other things and say, this one is just full of it. Clearly there's biases in this, right? And if I'm going to call out other people's biases and the way they kind of do estimations and stuff, I have to be willing to call it my own and just say, like, my own view of this is BS, right? I can't trust my own eyes on this. And this is one of those, like, I am not going to trust my own eyes on this. Right?
Got it.
I have a question here for Marcus. Is that I've been talking to a lot of the national media. They call a lot, just kind of a temperature check, like, anything else going on, what's happening over there, and everything else. And there's a perspective from the national media, at least some in the national media, that the Black community is getting played by a lot of these politicians who are out here who are posturing to be able to put themselves in a better position and better profile and everything else. And when we're looking at what's going on here, even if you put defund to the side, right? Because all that money right there, that's money that's going to go into, even if they took the 50%, right? All that's going to go, it goes into community services and everything else, so that's fine. So let's not put that over there. But where are we talking about in here that actually builds equity for Black people in the Seattle, the Central District, and the South End? And it seems like a lot of that is what's lost in the conversation because, where's, sorry about that, we're falling apart over it. Where are the economic drivers? You see what I'm saying? Where is it but because I think a majority of people, whether they agree or not, they're all for putting things in the situations of a hand up. So here's a handout, but man, where in all of this conversation is the actual hand up? It's like, okay, well, man, here's key business drivers. Here's how we're gonna do this with like King Cut with Africatown with land and things like that. But because things that are government funded, when the funding runs out, it runs out. But to build real equity is things that are self-sustaining over time.
Right. And
so
where in
all of this are the things that come, this like Black community, you're going to be better tomorrow than you were today because here are some sustaining tools that you're going to be able to manage and sustain. Not government, the funds from moving from here to there, but here is a system, a systemic change, right? And so I'm just curious. And now the mayor's talking about, I'm going to give $100 million next year, for the next 10 years. And she's going to unveil that in September. She's going to do some other stuff or everything else. But a lot of this money, like I said, is going to programs, which is cool, but we don't see the money that's going into things that actually build an equity stake for black people in the city. I mean, when you look at gentrification in the Central District used to be almost 80% black. Now it's somewhere between 7 and 15%. When you look at home ownership across King County, black home ownership totally in decline. When you look at Seattle public schools, so, the bottom 10% of school districts in America when it comes to the black students and everything else. And I'm just, those are three key things right there. When it's medium income, you have a black household in Seattle makes $42,500 a year. A white household makes $105,000 a year. I'm gonna repeat that for people watching internationally who are like, what? Are you serious? Yes, a black household in the city of Seattle makes $42,500 a year. A white household makes $105,000 a year. I know I've been long-winded, Mr. Marcus Harrison Green, but in all of this talk about making a better Seattle for black people, where is the conversation about long-term systemic equity building and not just funding programs?
Well, and then, just take it even, reduce it down a little bit, like, where is the talk about, like, who is going to be here to benefit for the programs that are going to be funded? There's a great article in the Seattle Times by the FYI guy, Gene Balk, and he talked about how the majority of people who are having to leave and to leave the city essentially because of rental evictions and not being able to afford living in the city anymore during this pandemic were disproportionately people of color, and specifically black folks. And so it's like we talk about these things, certain programs and so forth being funded, which I think is great, but it's also who is going to be here in a year or two to truly benefit from these programs. Is it going to be a shrunken black community? And are most of the people who are here now going to be in places like Puyallup, Tukwila, etc.? I can't tell you how many people, when I've gone to protests, they've been like, oh, we drove from Kent, we drove from Des Moines, or we drove from Hopewell, and so like, who is actually, like, when this does come, like, who is actually even just going to be here to benefit from this? And that's a question.
But the thing is too is if you get funded in, you can get funded out. Like we see this, a change of administration, a different council and everything. What is being in we're going to clearly talk again going into Monday's vote and after, but what is actually being put in place that isn't going to rely upon government funding? Like, you see what I'm saying? Like, what are some of the things we have to have? We're talking about a change for the better, for a better Emerald City, for all of us. Right. It can't be that, okay, the answer is just to fund this program. It has to be things that actually build equity and systemic changes. And I'm just curious because, man, I'm not seeing the earth-shattering rallies around that. Like Africatown's probably the only group that's talking about, look, man, we need this land over here. We want to build apartments and everything else. Clearly land equals equity, but are you seeing any of these things?
No, and I say that's the reason that Africatown is talking about talking about owning land is because it is a tool for wealth generation, and it has been a tool for wealth generation here. And there's nothing that I see, to your point, and maybe, I don't know, something will happen between now and Monday, but to your point, I don't see anything when we talk about like actual wealth generation that can be passed on from generation to generation here in the city. That doesn't appear to exist right now.
Right.
And I'll tell you, I very much
Kevin, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I very much hope it does. We talk about, and look, I know it's still, the concept of reparations can still be very controversial in terms of how you do it and so forth. But it's just a fact that the city, when it engaged in things like redlining, it not only, pushed Black people towards towards areas that were sort of lower income and so forth, and where the property values were lower. But it also effectively halted a lot of their ability to generate wealth. And so, I mean, that has to be redressed at some point. I don't know how exactly you do it, but it needs to be addressed immediately.
Well, I mean, now is the time. Clearly, this is the time if people are going to have, these kind of conversations. And the thing is, like I said, I have a real worry that a lot of lip service is going to be made to, and maybe funds moved here and there to a lot of programs that do need funding. They do good work, but you know what? That fundamentally. So basically, there's going to be money to be able to stop the leak, but not build new. You know what I'm saying? To not build new infrastructure. So they're going to spend money to. You know what? We're spending money to treat the symptom instead of actually treating the disease. And so then the symptom goes away for a while, like put a little cortisone there. Then ultimately it could be, 5 years, 7 years, 2 years from now, you come back, the symptoms keep coming back because the root causes aren't addressed. And a lot of the things of the programs are to treat the symptoms. A lot of them, though, I will say some social issues are for the disease, but a lot of the big disease that Black people in Seattle are facing is economic positioning.
Yes, and I'll use this analogy. It's the difference between polishing the brass on the Titanic, which it looks cool, and it's cool for now I'm here, and course correcting, and let's spin this mug around, let's do a 180, and go in the opposite direction. And those are two distinctly different things. And I to be real with you, I see a lot. I see more of this as polishing the brass on the Titanic. To be real with you, not to say that it doesn't need to be polished while we course correct. Anyhow.
Hey, the band kept playing on the Titanic.
They
Kevin,
did.
So tell us what's it looking like? Well, one, if you have a number, and if you don't have an analysis right now, it's cool. I know the vote just ended, but how much money is on the table going into the vote on Monday? And if you could just walk our viewers through what's the next steps as far as how city council works? What can people expect to see on Monday?
Sure. So, the big money is $17 million going into community-led organizations to help do the capacity building, and sort of the planning for a bigger rethink of SPD next year. The money, the potential savings from cutting SPD positions, 100 positions this year, because they don't really know how quickly they can lay those folks off, and whether even November is optimistic for that. They're basically not planning on spending that money right now. They're just kind of putting what they call a proviso on it, so that SPD can't go off and spend that money. And so if they need it for payroll, they'll still have it. So there isn't really any money savings on that side right now from this big kind of cut. The big money is sort of the 17 million. What's going to happen is Monday they'll probably do a couple little technical amendments just to clean up overlaps and weird little things and typos that they find in all the amendments that they passed today. And then Monday morning, they will have a budget meeting where they pass it out of committee. And then Monday afternoon, the full council meets like they do every Monday afternoon, and they will do the final approval on these budget changes. And that's when it really becomes official and it goes off to the mayor for her approval. And that will probably be a unanimous vote on the council. And then I'm not sure what the mayor is going to do with it at that point. She certainly has objections to some of the things that are in there, but maybe over the weekend they'll I'll come up to come to some kind of agreement on it.
How many amendments are going up for vote on Monday?
Let's see. It's going to be about almost everything went through today. So they don't, in terms of new amendments that didn't get approved today, on Monday, what they're going to do is basically, all these amendments they did today got their changes to, kind of a bill that's pending. That bill is still pending. On Monday, they just have to basically approve the amended bill, right? There's probably 3 or 4 more things I'd say that they will do, like sort of last minute amendments that will see to that. They've got a bunch of other bills that sort of accompany all that change spending policies and things like this. So they can do all the things they want to do. So I think altogether there's probably going to be 10 or so different bills that get passed, but very few sort of substantive amendments. At this point, they've made their big decisions, and it's mostly just paperwork from this point.
Okay, so they vote on the amendments, right? So actually, two questions here. Do you expect any surprises from anybody that voted yes in committee that they're going to vote no in actual? Does that happen often, or basically people who voted yes in committee today, we could expect them to vote yes on Monday?
For the most part, people who vote yes today will vote yes on Monday, and they're not going to. Monday won't be a repeat of today where they go individually through all these things again. Again, they're just going to kind of vote on the big thing. I didn't really get a sense that anybody felt completely disgruntled by sort of the process of this. So, I think if there were 2 council members, the ones that would be, I don't want to say they're on the fence, but if there were any 2 that had any possibility of flipping on it, it would be council members Peterson and Juarez. At this point, Peterson, he seemed pretty supportive today. I don't think he's going to vote against it on Monday. And Juarez, she had objections to some of the things the council is pushing through earlier, having to do with where they're pulling money from and are they being fiscally responsible. I don't think she's going to have that kind of problem with this. And this doesn't really, she's been pushing very, very hard to make sure that they have a plan for the cuts that they're making and not just sort of doing, irrational things. But she added her name as a co-sponsor to a whole bunch of bills today. So she seems all in. I think it's going to, my guess is it's going to be unanimous on Monday.
And so then they vote, something passes unanimous. You said that it goes to the mayor. And so walk us through that step now. So it passes, it goes to the mayor's desk. What's the mayor's options?
The mayor gets to sign or veto each of the individual bills. So the one bill that contains all the SPD related stuff that passed today, she gets to say yes or no on. And I think there's a fair chance that she's going to veto it, which means it goes back to the council and they have to override the veto on this. And the way there's different kinds of things. I'm going to be technical for a moment here. There's different things that the council votes on that require different kind of levels of vote. For a lot of the bills, it's just a simple majority, 5 out of the 9, and it passes. And then if the mayor vetoes it, then they have to get 7 out of 9 in order to override the veto. For almost all budget-related bills, it basically has to be 7 or 8 out of 9 anyway that approve it. It has to be a 3/4 majority to approve it, which is pretty much already veto-proof. So, generally speaking, any budget bill that makes it out of the council is already pretty much veto-proof. So the mayor can veto it and send it back, but she's really just wasting everybody's time by doing that because it's going to pass anyway, right? Unless some new information came to light that made everybody realize, oh no, we have to rethink this because this isn't going to work. It's going to pass, right?
Right. So let me ask you this before we get out of here, Marcus. One, do you have any other questions of Kevin? And 2, man, what's all this mean?
Man,
question for the end, yeah.
Yeah, if I knew that, I would have played the lotto. But Kevin, I want to ask you, what do you think what would be the fallout, the political fallout, should Mayor Durkin, veto whatever the city council passes on Monday?
I don't think the political fallout is going to be whether she vetoes it or not. I think the political fallout happens, after the city council overrides it and it goes into effect anyway. And so the weird tension here is the city council can appropriate money for the executive departments to spend, and they can't spend any money that the city council doesn't appropriate. But the city council can't force them to spend the money, right? So, and this is a little bit of a reverse of that game because they're cutting money in a bunch of different places. Will the mayor and the labor relation and the HR department drag their feet on negotiating with the unions over these layoffs so it takes longer? They could do that. And, even if they don't actually do that, if it takes a long time, they could be accused of doing that, right? So I think the political fallout is going to be more in terms of what the mayor and her branch of the government actually does after these budget changes pass. Do they work hard to try to implement them? Do they drag their feet on them? Do they get accused of dragging their feet even if they're not dragging their feet? Do they try to work around some of the limits? How does Chief Best, assuming layoffs actually happen, where does she actually lay off people from, and how does she move her people around to try to cover things? What are her priorities going to be? I think that's where a lot of political fallout is really going to be, and not in this particular vote.
Got it. All right. Well.
So what does it mean?
All right.
You don't get to escape that question. What does it mean?
Yeah, we had a second question.
It means that I will wait with bated breath until Monday. That's what that means. All kinds of
There we go. Must see TV part 2.
Yes.
Well,
yes.
there's going to be a lot of speeches. Both,
Yes.
2 rounds. Monday morning, when they pass this out of committee, there's going to be a lot of speeches. And then Monday afternoon in full council, there's going to be more, right? The 2 things guaranteed for Monday are a lot of public comment and a lot of council members giving long speeches.
So really quick, before we go, what's your bets on the national headlines that will emerge Tuesday morning? Coming out about the vote happening.
Oh my.
And I'm talking about legitimate media, not like Fox News.
Yeah. Actual news people might read. Yeah. It depends how much they read into the details. If there's somebody who understands that they're cutting 100 positions from, the 2,100 in SPD, they might write that, city council gives SPD a haircut, as a down payment to bigger changes, or commits to bigger changes in 2021. Or, if they don't read in the details, they could say city council, starts making big cuts to SPD.
All right.
It's hard to say. The devil is really in the details in this. And, as we've been talking about for an hour, there's a lot of nuance in this, and that almost never gets captured in the headlines.
Yeah. Yeah, leave it to you, Kevin, to not go for the sensationalistic headline.
What's your headline going to be? What's your headline going to be on Tuesday? Because you're going to write about this.
Literally, you can with the paper.
Yeah, I'm definitely doing hours of editing. I know. Shoot, I don't know. The city council defies Durkin or something. Defunds SPD. Something with a little juice to it, but not, and some true. Obviously, you want it to be factual and a little juice to it. So,
how do you guys feel about using the term defund at this point? Is it become so vague to be meaningless, or is it still important as a rallying cry for people?
I think it's still important. I think it still has some juice. I don't think it's lost its weight quite yet. In my opinion, I think it still definitely has legs, as they say.
Do people associate it with 50%, or do people think about it more broadly?
What I've seen is that I think a lot of people use it interchangeably, and when you say defund, it's almost automatic 50%. I don't know. What about you, Bo? What's your feelings on that? Do you think people use it interchangeably, or are those 2 separate entities?
Yeah, I think that a lot of people, when they hear defund, I mean, if you're on a street level protester who protested, that's in the chant. How much to
Right.
defund SPD? 50%, right? But for people who aren't on the street level and everything else, I think defund means, reduce funding. It's not necessarily tied to, a 50% or anything like that. They want to see, I mean, the biggest thing that people talked about with defund, I think that more than a percentage was the redirection of funds.
Right.
That was the thing, is redirect funds from the police over to the community. So I don't think that the term is going to lose energy out here in the streets, because this is they're gonna keep it up. They're gonna keep
Yeah.
the pressure on it.
Good.
With that, I think that what we'll see is, I mean, like I said, my big concern here is, I mean, it's not even put defund to the side. Even though I know that's what we're talking about today, my big concern here, especially like for us guys over here at Converge, we, like I said, covered this day one, man. You know what I'm saying? We're still here.
Yeah.
For everything that our city has gone through, our Emerald City has gone through, and whether you're a protester, you're in CHOP, whether you work for the city, whether you live in a neighborhood that's far away from the protest zone or from the black community. I mean, collectively as a city, we've gone through this here for the last 2 months. And I just think that whatever these end results are, they need to be worth what we've all gone through here as citizen stakeholders.
Yeah.
So, and it's yet to be determined the final outcome, but I think it would be disappointing for all of us here in the city that if we don't get to the other side of this and not be in a better Emerald City for it.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. I would hate this conversation. I'm sorry. I was gonna say, I hate this conversation to take place in Puyallup 2 years from now. We got the Converge Studios and Emerald in Puyallup. So yeah, so to your point, you
that's a whole nother conversation. we got to wrap it up, guys. Before I thank you, I have to thank the team here at Converge. Came up with this idea like less than a day ago. They're giving you guys a hand online over here, man. And it was like, how can we add value to the citizen stakeholders out there? And, I mean, we have a platform right here where we're able to give analysis in long format. A lot of our colleagues are restricted because, in broadcast news, they got to make everything fit in 2 minutes or 3 minutes. And, that's the advantage of the Converge platform, is that we're able to sit here and have informed discussions and everything else. So definitely want to. I got to thank Alia. I need to thank Nikki. I need to thank Bobby. And Jake and Eric were out there earlier, and Marcus saw that we were both on screen, and then we had the protest on screen as well. This was all where. This is on the fly. We didn't practice this beforehand. So, you know what I'm saying? In a technical sense, this all came together very well. We got to give another hand to our production team, man. They've done an outstanding job. Want to thank you, Marcus Green. Tell people how they can find you.
Yes, SeattleEmerald.org. And I do want to say, like, everybody watching this, please give anything that you can to the Converge team. I don't even watch TV. I barely, go online. I'm more of a stoic type person. But O is must see and Converge is must see. And please, if it's $1, $2, $3, give whatever you can. They're doing some of the best journalism in the city. And I say that as a fellow journalist.
Man, thank you. That means a lot. Appreciate it. And Kevin, how can people catch up with you, and especially people who like to read late into the night for all these
my
documents?
God! If you like to read,
catch up with you?
I am as about as wordy and nerdy as it gets. So, sccinsight.com. Please check it out. And Omari, you are the best. You are, the other half of why Converge is so awesome. And, I donate to support you guys. I encourage everybody else to do it too, because of the work you're doing and the voices that you are lifting up, and just giving a platform to is just incredibly important. The work you've done over the last 2 months, the whole team there at Converge, it's just been absolutely essential. I can't even imagine what this journey over the last 2 months would have been like if not for you and your team out there doing this just incredible work. So yeah, everybody should support you. I hope you guys keep doing this forever, because it is just critical and so essential, and you filled a really important gap in the city and in the news coverage and the conversations that we're having.
Absolutely.
Man, wow. Deep, man, real humble guys, because you know what I'm saying? I've brought a real great team right here, man. You guys just, man, teamwork makes the dream work, and we came together today here on literally as a team on the screen. So, you know what I'm saying? I'm looking forward to it. I hope we can get everybody back together definitely next Monday, you know what I'm saying, for round 2 for this team right here for analysis. So on behalf of my colleagues here at ConvergeMedia, Marcus Green and Kevin Schofield, I want to thank everybody for joining us for this. And programming note, catch us again live tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. for the morning update show. Until then, peace.
There's a lot going on. Are you ready? Ready to feel better, look better, be better? Drink water.